Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hey everyone, it's me, your host, Joe Slepsky. Welcome back to Joe on Joe. This is the only podcast where I covered every episode of the Sunbow cartoon, DIC. We talked extreme, and every issue of the Real American Hero comic book, page by page, panel by panel, all 155. I appreciate everyone for sticking with me throughout that ordeal. It was so enjoyable, but it was long. We did it. And this week is another episode of You on Joe. That's right. You, the G.I. Joe fan, you love America's favorite counterterrorism team. Well, you're the star of this show. The specific favorite thing that you love about the Joes, that's our feature. Some of you really dig the cartoons. Some of you really love the comic books. Most of you are way into the action figures. Anything about G.I. Joe is minor as you want to get. It's up for discussion. So if you want to participate and be a guest, please reach out to me on social media. It's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at JoeOnJoePod. You can send me an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com, and you can let me know what topic you'd want to cover. The more specific, the better. And if you're not sure what topic, we'll work with you. I love finding new topics with people, and we'll have a good time. And while you're online, please give me a rate and review in your favorite podcast app. Every review helps grow the show. If you are so inclined, you can visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/JoeOnJoePod, and that helps keep the show afloat as well. Speaking of that, let's please give a lot of love to our wonderful sponsors, the Movies and a Meal podcast. In the beginning of time, the smallest organism gained sentience and thought to itself, I really need a good meal. Then, a bunch of other stuff happened, and finally the Lumiere brothers started showing movies in France. This was all the inspiration that fellow broadcasters Brad, Keith, and Ben needed to combine these two primal needs into the Movies and a Meal podcast. The Movies and a Meal is one of the most casual and relaxing film talk podcasts you could ever listen to. These three friends enjoy a good meal together while talking all about the movies. And not just reviews, they do favorite lists, comparison discussions, genre talks, anything and everything that you can think of. They've even broken their solemn promise inherent in the name and branched out into TV talk. So I love the variety of films they bring to the table. They cover new releases, classics, cult films, often in one episode. It's really a delight to listen to, and it has something for every movie fan out there to enjoy. So if you're looking to grow your podcast library, if you eat meals, and if you've ever seen a movie, then you should give Ben, Keith, and Brad a listen and subscribe to the Movies and a Meal podcast. They've been a great sponsor to this show. I love the Movies and a Meal podcast, and I'd like all of you to love them too. So last week, I brought you Roger Taft from the After Action Report Kickstarter. This week, we welcome his partner in crime on the After Action Report Command Files, Mr. Greg Agustin. This is a project collecting dossiers on each member of the G.I. Joe team with complete real-world verisimilitude, as you'll learn during this interview. Their Kickstarter ends on April 15th, tax day. So head over there right now and check it out. Don't wait. If you're hearing this after April 15th, just follow them on Kickstarter because they're going to be doing more volumes, and you'll be able to retroactively get the book. So once you hear this, I think you're going to be interested. Well, Greg reached out and he said, I want to talk about, surprise, surprise, Filecards. That's right. The cherry on top of the G.I. Joe action figure experience. Filecards were with us from the very start. They provided a common database for all of us fans. This was before the internet, before social media. We all knew who these guys were, what they liked, who were the card sharks, who led by examples. I cannot stress enough how much these cards were important in the overall growth of the entire G.I. Joe brand and the global success that we all saw it, let alone on a personal level, the way that I connected, and I know you connected with these toys. So together, Greg and I, we pour over some vintage cards. We talk specific portions of the cards, break it down, why those portions are important, and we have a really good conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy You on Joe with Greg Agustin talking Filecards.
Yeah, so that's kind of the angle I took with command files. So After Action Report Command Files is we kind of position as a character guy, but in terms of how I wanted to approach it and present it, I took a little forward. They took like a real world angle. With Command Files, I asked the question, what would G.I. Joe look like in the real world as a real special missions force? So I handled it a number of ways. I framed the entire book in under a mock Senate report. It's written to Senator Wendy Ling Torres. So some of the comic readers would know that she's actually the chairperson of the subcommittee that oversees G.I. Joe.
Yes. I was
And,
just going to
right.
say that. Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's the way I kind of structured it in terms of going in depth and understand like what does the command structure of G.I. Joe, like how is it laid out? I don't know how much you want to dive into that part, but I kind of structure it like like a special forces company, just like in glass. So
if we can't do a deep dive into
Yeah.
a G.I. Joe reference book on a G.I. Joe podcast, then what are we doing with this
What's
world?
the point?
What are we doing with
I
our
gotcha.
lives, Greg?
I hear you. Well, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, because it was a rabbit hole for me, just to kind of untangle this, as you will. Because if I harken back to like the Arise Serpento Arise episode, the very first episode where we got the comic book view of the command structure, you had Flint explain to Beachhead. First comes Hawk, then comes Duke, then comes me, then finally you, Beachhead. I go, that's kind of really simplistic, but I kind of get it. But I really wanted to understand when I look at the file card and see that the file cards that see that Flint was a warrant officer, and I go look it up on the side what a warrant officer did. I go, that kind of outranks Duke, and I kind of didn't kind of understand that. So I went and did some research and trying to understand what ranks and seniority and things of that nature, and I ended up with special forces and understanding what a special forces team looks like. It's a 12-man team. It has a detachment commander, assistant commander, and then they have something called an operations sergeant and an assistant operations sergeant, which was an intelligence sergeant. Then they had 2 medics, 2 engineers, 2 communications persons, and 2 weapons sergeants on there, which kind of laid the template of how I kind of laid out my book. So the book itself, it does have character guides. It does follow the file cards as they appear on the toy packaging.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did on there is in each kind of file entry, I added extra visuals in there. I added visuals from the comic, from the cartoon, from toy packaging, and
you're
created
treating each character as a holistic view, like
as a holistic view.
Overall traits, not just the Sunbow continuity or the DSC continuity or the Hama continuity.
That's absolutely
yeah. So which really is great, because that you taking this real world approach is the best way to envelop all of that.
Right. I wanted to represent the basic essentials of the character. And ever since I started this project, people are asking me what continuity these characters are going to be, what universe they're going to be in. And just before this interview, maybe an hour ago, I discovered maybe it's just the file card continuity. Because what I'm doing is just springboarding off what's represented in the file cards. I'm not doing anything different than what we did the old school Order of Battle that Herb Trimp with the new Herb Trimp art they did way back in the 80s with Marvel.
Yeah. Well,
I just brought that content over Larry's writings, essentially, or Hasbro writers' writings, and threw it into these file cards. And what I did was I shuffled the deck as I was doing like almost one of those deck building games, and said, okay, this character is a weapon sergeant, this character is a communication sergeant. I started building out teams. Obviously I have a winner, an Arctic operations team with the operations sergeant Snow Job as an example, a mountain team. The operations sergeant is Alpine, obviously, and went down the line. I also have a legit Sky Patrol, which was kind of
awesome.
Kind of cool, because if you look at what I've discovered going through the file cards, when I looked at how Sky Patrol was constructed, they actually have an engineer sergeant, a communication sergeant, a medic, a combat medic, etc. It was literally half an A team already developed. I don't know if that was on purpose, but it pretty much kind of mirrored like what they call a military free fall A team would be in a special forces unit.
Greg, you sound like you have a military background. Do you?
I'm sorry?
Do you sound like you have an actual military background? Do you?
I do not. This was just a lot of geeky reading on
Wow.
my part.
Because for real, I mean this in a very complimentary way. It's
Okay.
it's all flowing. It's flowing off your tongue so quickly.
Oh,
It's like there's life experience behind that, but you've never served or been in that capacity.
no, the closest I've ever been to this kind of in real life technology is I had a coworker worked with me a couple of years ago who's actually, honest to God, Special Forces detachment commander.
No,
He had served. He had served,
that's
he
don't
was
mess.
ultimate badass.
I don't know in what capacity you worked with him, but I'm just gonna say don't mess with that dude.
Don't mess with that. Oh, we would in our company culture, we'd break out with these random Nerf gun wars. We'd have like a shelf full of Nerf guns, and guess who would win each time?
Yeah.
Just take us out in the office. Yeah,
You
yeah.
touched what you touched on real quick because of course today we are absolutely talking about the after action report command files, which is available on Kickstarter, correct?
Yep.
Until I think 4/15 it ends.
It ends on no, yeah, it ends on tax day.
Tax day.
4/15, yeah.
Okay. Well
Yeah.
then, good. Get your taxes
Yep.
done, and then look at all the money you're going to get back from the government, and throw
Correct. Yeah.
some of it.
Use your refund on this.
Yeah,
Yes.
use your refund on this Kickstarter. I certainly backed it after reading the initial after action report, which we spoke about a couple weeks ago with Roger Taft. And I was so impressed with the after action report. Then I was like, well, yeah, let's find out more. And then I saw that you guys were doing another Kickstarter here, or that he was doing another Kickstarter with you, because after action was with Josh Egamine.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
this is, I'm really looking forward to this. And I love the description that you gave, but it opened up an old wound of mine.
What's
Whereas,
that?
which is the Order of Battle. I was a huge fan of the official handbook of the Marvel Universe and
Right.
how they,
I was too.
yeah, and I had to give all of them, and I read all of them so many times, and they summarized the life stories of these dudes and gave all their stories, and then here comes Order of Battle, and it's just the reprint of their file card.
Right. Right. I
With
looked at
great
it both.
pictures. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
Some really
Right. Well,
nice,
the
really
original.
nice artwork by artists
Right.
of era that I'm a big fan of. But man, imagine the resource had they built it out and done an actual official handbook style version.
Right. Right. There's a
What that
little
would
bit
have
of
been.
Yeah, I agree with that. I felt a little disappointed too because I didn't get this huge history and specs and stats and so forth of each character. But on the other hand, too, as a kid, my family, we weren't able to afford all the all the figures and get the file cards. We didn't have the internet back then to
True.
like look up all this information.
It's better than
And so
nothing. You're right. Better
right,
than nothing.
right, right.
And also, quite frankly, there wasn't a lot of history to draw on. So they would have basically Larry would have had to create history
Right, right.
for an
I
entire
think
universe that didn't exist. So
uh,
as an adult, I understand the real worldness of it, but
right.
it still stings, Greg.
It does sting, but I took it further. I tried to take that sting out, and when that Order of Battle was published, and I think I waited until the trade paperback came. And what was cool about that one was I got excited was with that trade paperback we got Lieutenant Falcon and Jinx and Chuckles and Fastdraw. They weren't in the original
Oh, really?
miniseries.
I don't have
Yeah,
the trade. Oh,
which
that's
was
interesting.
you know the
Did they
oh yeah,
remove Rocky? Did they pull Rocky from
they
it?
did remove Rocky.
Interesting. I didn't know
Um,
that. That's something new we learned today, here, listeners.
and I think there was somebody else that was mistakenly left off that wasn't in the miniseries. I can't remember. I don't remember if it's Clutch or whatnot, but there was somebody that they dropped, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but I do remember.
Probably
I
Grunt.
remember missing Ripper and like Grand Slam. They weren't in the original, I think,
Uh-huh.
and they still didn't show up in the trade
funny.
paperback, which was a disappointment.
So that's a good question. How comprehensive is your book, the After Action Report Command Files? Is it
Well,
is it like everything?
Well, yeah, that's actually a good question. So the scope of the files that I cover would be just the file cards that would that were published with the toys. So anything that had a file card that came out from
OG toys or
OG toys,
97 and beyond?
1982, the OGs all the way to the 50th anniversary cards, or whenever we had the last file
Oh,
cards.
okay. So including
Yeah.
the
So
2000s. Oh,
I
that's
scooped,
great.
yeah, I scooped in there, and I just wanted to let you know, yeah, that comes to about like 240 characters files, and because the page count of these after action books our report books are 144 pages, or about like 120 or so a book or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, if I did my math right. So the first part, what I spoke about, 8 teams, the first volume of After Action Report command files would be just these 8 teams that I scoped out. So 8 or 9 kind of special missions teams that
Right.
are dedicated to a specific mission set. And then the second volume would be what I call the support elements. You'll have your standard air operations and armor and mechanized infantry folks. So basically, the pilots and drivers, if
Awesome.
you will.
Oh, I
But I
love it.
also add in there folks that didn't make the cut for 8 teams. I have a couple classifications. I have something for eco warriors, and I have something
Sure.
for DEF, as an example,
Well,
in the second
that
volume.
is in this. That's very much in the spirit of the official handbooks, because yes, they went A to Z, but then they get to the Book of the Dead, and then they get to the like artifacts and like more encyclopedia entries and stuff like
Right,
that. So
right.
yeah, that's really great. And
Yeah.
and really, the original Order of Battle did it too, if I recall. Right, the
Uh,
last book
well,
was all vehicles.
right.
So
But I think
that makes a
the
lot of sense.
difference with my book though is yeah, those traditional encyclopedia formats are in alphabetical order for something. So like Order of Battle was alphabetical order for the Joes, and then they made
Sure.
a Cobra volume. For me, I just really want to underscore and specify so I don't so uh, folks don't get disappointed that yeah, these character files are not in the traditional alphabetical order. They are in, as I described, in team settings first,
For
group
what I can
group as
say, I
such.
don't think
Yeah.
people are going to be disappointed, Greg,
Yeah.
from what you have in
Okay.
this Kickstarter. So,
Okay.
just a reminder,
Thank you.
everyone, when you
Thank
hear
you.
this, go to Kickstarter. Again, we talked about it a couple weeks ago. You have a couple days left as of this recording. Go to Kickstarter and fund this, or at least check it out and share it. If it's not up your alley, there's going to be a Joe fan in your life who is going to love it. I was really
Yeah.
impressed with Roger's other work, so I can't wait to
Cool.
check this out. But now, you know, let's not bury the lead here. We are
Yeah,
talking about
right.
your wonderful book, Greg, but we
Yes,
are
yes.
here for file cards in general. And I
Absolutely.
am so stoked for this. I pulled out my personal file card holder.
That's
It's
sweet.
a really nice recipe like Tupperware style recipe box I bought over at the Container Store. It fits them perfectly. And
You got to send me a link to that. I gotta find one.
oh, I
I
will.
lost all
Yeah.
my old school ones. I have my modern day fig file cards, and I don't have a storage solution for those.
Oh,
So I'd love to hear.
this is I literally took a stack of file cards with me to the Container Store and matched it up with everything they had
Very
until I
good.
found one that's absolutely perfect, and it really works well. So I finally got them in order. They're right in front of me. I also have a vintage on card in front of me, so we can reference that and how beautiful these things were. Now, if I recall, these were the concept was originally driven by Kurt Bazingian, right?
Actually, I think the story is that it has to do with like the Star Wars launch too, like with Empire Strikes Back came out. But the
Mm-hmm.
way I understood it was they were about to launch um GI Joe the figure line, and this is without the file cards of that concept. At the same time as Empire Strikes Back, and I think, and then they decided, you know what, let's delay because we might get crushed by the new action figure, the sequel action figure line,
Mm-hmm.
and so they delayed. And while they were waiting to launch the next year, they stumbled upon Larry Hama's kind of scribblings of dossiers that he had made up for the character, so he could just keep them straight for themselves. And somebody along the lines, maybe it was Kirk, I'm not quite sure, said, you know what, those would be great to market on the back of the package. You get some personality of these figures. And as I understand it, they took the concept and say, hey, these are just like baseball cards.
Yeah.
These got file names. It has skills and history, skills and abilities. Let's put it on the back. And from that's just cool, because I think file cards is like the action figures are cool, the bright plastics and the vehicles and everything, but for some reason file cards were like the most favorite part
They're
of the toy line.
brilliant. That they
Yeah,
are brilliant.
yeah,
It might be the linchpin to sealing the deal as to it's absolutely one of the pillars of success of GI Joe. If
yeah,
you pull the
yeah.
file cards out, there's something missing from all this stuff, because then file cards give you especially in that era, pre even with the cartoon couldn't cover everybody. The cartoon wasn't giving us the adventures of Short Fuse, right?
Right.
But pre-internet, pre-social media, pre-contact with people, it gave you a common conversation with your friend down the street who may have also had that character. That when you got together, you both knew who Short Fuse was. You knew who Zap was. You knew what Snake Eyes was all about. You know, you knew who Tollbooth was. You didn't like him. You were like, why is he got a sledgehammer? But you knew who he was. And that common language, that bridges everything. That makes it, you're all on the same team.
Oh, you almost used Tollbooth and Bridge in the same sentence. Anyway, sorry.
You know, I really think that's just the key. I think that's just the key.
Yeah, it is. It's just a common story that boys could like build around.
Mm-hmm.
Play. They already knew. They didn't have to make up. You know, they had short fuse with a little visor. They didn't have to say, he had this type of special. He's my, I don't know, he's mortar sergeant, but he has more than that. There's a reason why he was named Short Fuse, which was like kind of cool.
Yeah,
and he had a short temper. Yeah,
snow
right.
job. Like,
oh, exactly.
I hate when people ascribe esteem to their own stories. But I will say this: often on the show we've told the story of this, so I think it's kind of legendary. Of my wife, who was often a guest on the show. She heard me say snow job and she started laughing. And I said, well, what's so funny? And she's like, well, his name's Snow Job. And I went, what? That's his name. It means he's a con artist. And she looked at me and was like, his name is Snow Job. And I had to think about it and I went, oh. And I'm talking, I was probably at the time I was 45 years old. Like,
oh, come on.
Oh, I'm not kidding. It never dawned on me because when I was a kid, and, you know, don't get me wrong, this is a very family-friendly show. But if you've ever heard me guest on shows like What's on Joe Mind, I'm filthy. I'm filthy. It got into...
those guys go off the rails.
Oh, yeah, they're the best. It got into my head at such a young age, I'm not even joking, that they called him Snow Job because it was a con man. I never put any connotation on it until my wife pointed it out. And I was like, okay, yeah, no, that's really funny.
Yeah. Well,
but it's
well,
true,
if you go back, if you go back to my Instagram, I did a little kind of mashup with my blowtorch and Snow Job. I did a head swap, and I said rename these figures. So I just left it at that.
I'll tell you what. These file cards, they were the first time I was introduced to the idea of a social security number.
Oh, right.
I didn't even know what that was.
Like, right.
And
like, I don't even know if they're. Oh, go ahead.
Well, we can also use them to do some identity theft.
Right.
Because these are full on social security numbers.
I don't even know where they came from. Well, actually, I wasn't quite sure if they were social security. Maybe it's spaced out that way. I thought they were really like there. Some of the earlier serial numbers, they had the letters RA in front of it, and I thought that meant like regular army or something to that effect. Yeah, if I were to decode that. But I'm always curious of how Larry came up with his numbers. So you just roll. So you just said, some dice.
Wait, you said no. You're right here. I'm looking at one right now. It's dial tone. So you just said serial number. Is it? Does it mean serial number? It's not. They're supposed to be there because it's the same count.
No, I don't
it's
think
the same count as their Soch.
Is it? Yeah.
You know, it's the same number of characters. That's it. That's funny. I've always thought it was their Soch.
It could very well be that they started with, but there must have been a reason why. I'm assuming Larry put that in there because there's something in somebody's like army jacket that you probably do have a number. Maybe it does still have the same digit count.
Yeah. So here's Scarlet, and this is from the OG original my original Scarlet. It says RA 24296. So it is still the same number, but it does have that RA in front of it. Interesting.
Hey, I'll give you a little Easter egg too, since we're talking about it.
Sure.
These serial numbers. I did say that I replicated the content of the file cards into command files. I actually also painstakingly grabbed the original serial number and I stuck it in a little ID card graphic.
Amazing.
I did that for every one.
That's amazing. So that's the level of detail I absolutely adore. Greg.
First you've heard it. You're hearing it here first. I don't even think I called it out in the book. Oh, I just did it.
I love that detail. That is so great. The other piece that I absolutely love about these cards is that it didn't lead with their name.
Right.
Even the front of the cards too. It didn't lead with, "Hey everybody, Snake Eyes," you know.
Right.
It said in Scarlet's, I'm looking at it, it says counterintelligence.
Counterintelligence,
Alpine,
mortar soldier.
Alpine, mountain trooper.
Trooper, right.
And that subconsciously puts their role ahead of their individuality, which is what you want in a unit like G.I. Joe.
Right. I mean, if you remember the toy commercial when they first came out, it's like infantry trooper, grunt, communications officer,
Yeah,
breaker, right? It was like gave him some importance.
Yep.
In a way.
And later on, we get to now it does change a little bit though.
It does.
Let's be real, because remember I just pulled Outback out.
Yeah.
And it starts Codename Outback Survivalist.
Right. Yeah, I was just about to point that. I think 1988 or so. I think right around that time, I think marketing got in there saying we got to market their names.
Yeah, that is true.
And brought that up.
Yeah, I hate to just double back on what I said. I love the idea that they went position first, but you're right. Yeah, you're right, and it does make more sense because it's characters that people glom onto. But I love the Mountain Trooper stuff.
Right. I mean, if you look at the card back too, when they have the little tiles of each character, they do call them out first as originally counterintelligence, commando on the back, and then they switch to the character names later on.
Oh yeah, you're right. Right. Yeah. Helicopter Assault Trooper, airborne.
Right.
So
Helicopter Assault Trooper. I love that.
Okay, we're going, guys. We're assaulting this cover base. Are we doing it by helicopter?
Matter of fact,
Are we doing it by helicopter? No, actually, you can't do a helicopter. It's too windy. I'm going to sit this one out then.
It's funny you mentioned that. I have vintage airborne in my hand right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He's top on my list of dudes I never had when I was a kid. Always wanted. Loved his look. Never had him. Got him as an adult and was so happy when I got him. He absolutely was top on that list.
Yep. Hey, same here. I never had it as a kid. I just was at assembly required in November. I happened to see a complete set. I grabbed it. I had to because it's a classic look for me for some reason. It just calls to me.
Yeah. And of course, so it gave their primary specialty, but the secondary specialty, that was the flavor. That was the salt and pepper in your sandwich,
Right. You notice like most of them were like primary military specialty was infantry, and then after that, like you said, it gave a little extra oomph, which makes it different.
Give you a little something else, like Law and Order. Here, just pull Law and Order. Military police. Of course, that makes sense. You can tell. Right. You just look at the guys, military police, but then you look. Oh, he's also into intelligence.
Right.
Yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, here, Leatherneck, infantry. He was also a drill sergeant.
Right.
And you wouldn't think that.
Then you have the cool ones like Gung Ho, first military specialty, Recondo, and you're like, what the heck's Recondo?
Oh, was that his? Was his?
I believe
was his specialty.
I believe that's what it said.
Oh yeah, here it is. I just
gotta find it.
It's the Marine Gung Ho. Yeah, you're right. Military specialty, Recondo. His specialty was his friend Recondo. His job was just to watch out for his buddy Recondo. That's great. Oh, that's great. And now, did you cut yours out, right? I'm assuming.
I'd cut mine out. Absolutely. Yeah.
Because you had to get to. I was explaining this to my cousin who was in town recently. She's a big Transformers fan, and they had similar thing too, but it wasn't to this degree. But I had to explain about the flag points.
Right.
And I was like, between the file card and the flag points, man, no one was keeping their card backs together. Like you chop that thing up.
Yep. I got my Cobra Commander with flag points.
Yeah, me too. I got my Duke that way too.
And still to this day, I'm still lamenting where my Joes went.
Oh, wait a minute! You lost track of your Joes?
I lost my vintage shows. They're all gone. I had my mom when I way back when bought me the out of the Sears catalog. I got the 3-pack of Breaker, Rock and Roll, Grunt.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then Snake Eyes, Scarlet, and Stalker. I have those. I think they're the red back kind because I know I didn't get the full retail card back.
Okay.
But I did get I got the one that was in the smaller cardboard box, and I remember cutting those out. Yeah, but I don't remember what happened to them. I mean, I collected Joes all the time. With my brother too. I had them all the way to Night Force. I actually do know where I did manage to find a Sky Havoc.
Oh, did you really?
What's up? Yeah, the chrome plated Havoc.
Yeah. So
got
I
that,
have,
but I can't find anything else.
let's see what I have a red back wetsuit and mainframe, and that's from the Brazil.
Ah,
That must be from the Brazil special
so
missions. I had that set.
yeah, which
Yeah.
had a Claymore in it,
Of
right?
course,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Captain Claymore. Um, the next piece on these cards that again, I mean, everything about
Oh,
this is
actually, I
brilliant.
wanted to.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before you go on, based on specialties, that actually put me into another rabbit hole in terms of uh, how the Army describes specialties. Because when I investigated like special forces, what they really mean, what do these characters look like in the real world? Um, I discovered that the military specialties for special forces guys, they aren't isn't infantry anymore. They're specifically described as special forces weapon sergeant, as I said before, special forces medical sergeant. And so when I did this book, I decided to flip that or kind of upgrade those two. So as I represent the military specialties in the book, I lay it out like that as if it was today. However, I do acknowledge the facts. I acknowledge like the history of like what the original were, and I do in footnotes call out the original primary military specialty was infantry, or the secondary military specialty was small arms armorer. I'll call that out. But in learning about military occupational specialties, I learned that airborne isn't a military specialty. It's a, what do they call it? And I guess real military guys are going to probably correct me, but I think it's called a special qualification
Okay.
identifier, right? And so same thing as ranger. Ranger isn't a specialty or sorry, especially a title. It's like a school or a training qualification
Yeah.
that you get. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
So I went down that level and kind of deconstructed what Hama meant back then and what Hasbro writers meant since,
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of grounded in real world, because that's kind of those are one of the things that got me excited about G.I. Joe and reading these file cards, is that Hawk was radar. I go, what is that? Or Flash on his card, it had something called CBR. I go, what the heck is CBR? Chemical, biological, radioactive. I went and kind of chased down what that meant too.
Mm-hmm.
So it opened up this world of wow, they really took the time to tie these down to real military, real life kind of jargon and terminology, which I
Yeah.
was really jazzed
Well,
about.
you
It
know,
was
I mean,
complete.
Larry
Yeah, go
had
ahead.
that experience. I know he did
Yeah,
his,
absolutely.
he did as much effort to do that as possible, for sure.
Yeah, so there's a little grounding, if you will,
Yeah.
in terms of that. It was a much different take than like Star Wars,
Sure.
which is
Oh, of course.
sci-fi,
Yeah.
right?
And
Yeah.
the other bit of grounding there is the next piece on the card, which is their
Yeah.
place of birth.
Yep.
Which is so smart to include. Now, it seems like a natural thing, include where they're born, but it's so smart because, especially when you're younger, where you're from, a place you can identify with, there's very few things that are more important than that, right? It's the provincial. That's my sports team. I love the Cubs because I'm from Chicago. Like that's it. That's the team you like because that's where you're from. So you get one of these and you get a let's see, let's pull a rando out here, cross country. He's from Greensboro, North Carolina. So it's like, so all the guys from Greensboro must be like, that's our guy.
Yep.
And then when you get to the cards like, oh, here we go, like Raptor, where it's just unknown, but anything that is unknown, it just adds this added sense of mystery,
right?
Yeah, to it, because everyone else you do know. That Scarlett's from Atlanta. That Ripcord's from Columbus, Ohio. Snake Eyes, classified, even more mysterious.
Oh yeah.
That's kind of stuff it brings so much life, and
it's a lot more relatability, right?
Exactly. And it's the theory, it's the horror movie theory where you can imagine more than any writer or director could put on a screen or on a page. If there's, if they're killing someone in a horror movie and they cut away at the right moment, in your head it's going to be much more gruesome than almost anything they could put on screen, right? So when you get to the unknowns of the world, in these cards, your brain could take it into any which way, but the other cards ground you. But it could be anything more exciting than by saying, oh yeah, Snake Eyes is from Topeka.
Right. I like too that also did help kind of assign when they did the cartoon, like assign the voice talent. You say, hey, they need this guy to have a southern drawl, or this guy needs to sound like he's from Jersey, right?
You're right.
That actually brings a lot more.
Yeah, that
real
makes
experience, right?
That makes a lot of sense. And on the cartoon, because it's just voices, you need that kind of distinction. You need that over the top bit to just differentiate yourself. It's one of the perils that when you watch it, I think they're getting better with it, to be fair. But in the last 20 years, with every animated movie having to feature an actual movie star, and they're just doing their regular movie star voice instead of an actual voiceover actor doing a voice. Yeah, all the voices are so bland and they're so normal because it's just that actor thinking that that's all they got to do.
That's all they got. Yeah.
And not everybody. There's certainly some actors that bring it, but
yeah. I mean, did in Retaliation, did The Rock actually rhyme at all?
Oh, you know what? I just watched that this morning. I'm not even joking.
You did, really?
I literally did. Listeners, it's on Amazon Prime, the extended edition, which I had never seen and I don't know that I was aware of. It's on Amazon Prime, so I hit play on it this morning.
Oh.
Yeah, and it was a better movie.
Are you going to spoil it?
It was a better movie.
No way, really?
I think it added 15 minutes to it or 10 minutes. And
I gotta check it out then.
Actual character beats. It didn't feel rushed. It didn't feel like they weren't explaining things. They just actually, it was a movie and it was entertaining.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really was an improvement. And you go, well, the only reason they would have chopped that, because anyone watching the two movies would have said the extended cut's better. The only reason they would have chopped that is by chopping that much, 15 minutes out of a movie, they could show it at least one more time every day at the theater. So that's a complete financial decision and shame on them. Because if you watch those two versions together, you're going to say, oh, the quote extended edition is absolutely a better movie.
Right. Kind of like people were saying about the Justice League Snyder cut.
Oh, exactly.
Break it out. Yeah.
Completely.
Now I got to ask you, the extended for Retaliation, do they have footage in there that leaves room for having Duke survive?
No point did Doc come out of the shadows and go, hey, everybody, Duke's going to be okay.
Okay.
No. He still goes. There's a couple of things in there that's still it's still the same movie. It's still the same movie, but there's some added interaction. A lot of it with The Rock, some added scenes, and it takes its time to roll out the story.
Sorry, I may have missed that. Did you throw that Doc? Were you quoting from G.I. Joe the movie, the cartoon?
Oh yeah. It's the best.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
Oh yeah.
Very good.
Well played.
Well,
you haven't.
Well
we
played.
were talking before this, listeners. Greg hasn't heard the G.I. Columbo, but listeners, if you heard the G.I. Columbo episode, and Greg, that's always revolves around a murder, right?
Yes.
So
it was my mom's favorite detective.
He's the best. And so when I was putting that together, I was like, well, I really don't want to have someone be murdered. Because I was trying to play the rules of G.I. Joe where no one can get murdered. And so it dawned on me, well, of course, the answer is at the very end of the episode. Spoiler alert, if you haven't heard it, you get he's going to be okay. Because no one can die. Yeah. So yeah, no, I love that. That's one of my absolute favorite lines. The next bit on the card was the biography. This was the fun stuff.
The meat and potatoes.
Yeah. Gives you flavor, tells you about their background, doesn't tell you about their background. If it's mysterious, it tells you that it's just obviously Snake Eyes is probably the best example of it, and we call him
I love it. Yeah. Snake Eyes is holistic medicine or practices holistic medicine, something like that.
So it just tells you like all the stuff you would find in any kind of a military dossier, but then that's
right.
Like he served in the LRRP, he left the service, then he came back. He's got a wolf. That's it. He'll kill you. That's great. But then someone like Scarlett, you get her father and her three brothers were martial arts instructors. She began her training at age 9 and was awarded her first those kind of actual, we'll say biographical things. And
I love my favorite.
So good.
When I remember was when I had Flash. He goes, Flash is taking is learning electronics in night school or something like that. Which I thought, pretty cool. They're still getting educated while they're fighting Cobra.
Well, so I just pulled Lifeline. So good. He was a paramedic with the Seattle Fire Department.
Yeah.
Before he discovered that the EMS personnel who were disabled while giving aid off duty were not eligible for pensions. So in his mind, rescue personnel were never off duty. He decided to make his status permanent. It's good. It's funny though. It doesn't say on here, and it couldn't actually, because he's carrying a gun in the thing, that he was a pacifist.
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
I don't think I ever realized that, because I knew he came with the gun, and that never made sense with the cartoon. But it's actually not even on his card.
Yeah, I wondered with Lifeline, that gun, was it like a tranquilizer gun or something? Like, that's how I rationalized it as a kid.
He's got vaccines in it.
Right. Because I remember when we first see Lifeline in a Rise Serpentor Rise, he's like leaning on the tomahawk, and then I think Lift Ticket was working, and he says, "Oh, why aren't you helping?" He goes, "I'm not gonna be party to putting together weapons of war," or something like that.
Yeah.
And then in the comic, I remember, and I don't know if it's in the fucker, but Lifeline was like a big Aikido. He was in Aikido, or he practiced Aikido on some like pirates or something like that. And showed that this was a non-violent way to quash a conflict. Yeah.
I think the one bit of file card that just completely I did not understand as a child, and it more than snow job, and it's painted an entirely different picture of the character than it meant to, is Wild Weasel.
Right.
And I will read from his file card. Wild Weasel cut his teeth in the bus wars of South America and Africa during the last decade. I did not know what the phrase cut his teeth meant.
Oh.
I thought Wild Weasel's mask was hiding a horrible, horrible face deformation. I thought Wild Weasel had no teeth, and that's why he kept his mask on.
And you went literal with that.
I went so literal, and it wasn't until I was way older. I probably was doing this, and it dawned on me, oh, he doesn't have a facial deformity.
Oh. Hey, that's funny. Oh, this is a good opportunity though, since you mentioned Wild Weasel Cobra file card. So these first two volumes are just Joe's only, just to clarify. So the 240 Joe's, and then there's plans for a third volume that will be Cobra. And awesome. I do have the intention of understanding the command structure of Cobra too, and trying to map that out.
Good luck.
In a way. Yeah, I know so many fans have tried many iterations of that.
If you can find out which Cobra is responsible for their retirement plan and or vacation, like their vacation suites, that I want that in your book. I want you to be like, and it turns out Copperhead is responsible for the retirement community.
That's his military, or his additional skill.
Yeah, exactly. Because somebody had to do it, because they had their own. I want to know who was the editor of their monthly magazine, Cobra Monthly.
Right.
They had a magazine. They absolutely had a magazine. I want to know what Cobra was.
It.
Yeah, who was the Cobra? Who was the Cobra proofreader and typesetter to put all that together in a Photoshop? Pre-digital. They were putting together old school magazines.
What I was most interested in when I want to tackle Cobra is I want to understand the kind of military career of a Cobra trooper. Does he go to a Viper, and then he graduates to Eels, and then from Eels they become Snow Serpents or Hydro Vipers, and there's Lampreys. I wanted to kind of logically map that out. I know at some point Hasbro writers will say, "Oh, that sounds good. Just throw it on the back of the package." But I wanted to kind of deconstruct that and reassemble it and make.
Well, you just touched. I mean, you did just touch on one of the great things about those Cobra file cards is that they said, and I'm looking for one right now, and I can't. I don't know if I can find it, but things like exactly what you said. They graduated, so it was like, what is it? Like no one wanted to be the Toxo Viper. So they, they were regular Vipers, and then they got the really bad assignments, and then they moved over to being a Toxo Viper. Or if they were really sturdy, they'd become a they just released it. They're just announced they're doing a classified of it. The guy with the Viper, Range Viper, the
Range Viper,
yeah,
that's an awesome looking figure. By the way,
that figure looks amazing. But it's that kind of detail that would be on those cards that as a kid again you'd go, oh man, so there is a hierarchy and they are connected.
Right,
not just
hierarchy. That's right.
So they, they start as just these regular soldiers, then they become Vipers, and then they become this, and then they become that. Like, it's great.
Yeah, so that's the kind of things I want to explore. But yeah, that's 3 books down the line.
Yeah, you got
Anyway,
some work.
stuff in my head.
Yeah, you got some work to do. I love it. And then the last part of the traditional file card is, I mean, I keep saying it's the best part, but this is the part that gives you a third person's perspective.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you skipped a little. There's a part in kind of the profile that's actually special too that I thought was Larry called out the school that somebody went to. They went to covert ops school.
You're totally right. Yes, especially on the early ones. Yeah, you're totally right. Yeah. He would get into the actual military training that they had, what kind of weaponry they were skilled on. Yeah, you're 100% right.
One of my favorite ones was Clutch. He went to executive bodyguard school.
Did he really?
Which is kind of cool. Yeah. Which is cool. VIP protection, right? I mean, because it makes sense. He's a driver, right? Probably drives around VIPs.
Yeah, and so I just pulled Crankcase. Graduated Ranger School and Desert Warfare School and attended the Special Air Service Tactical Driving School under the NATO exchange program. Qualified expert in the M16, M19, M60, and the TOW. Oh, that's great. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I didn't mean to skip that over.
And I'm glad you called it Crankcase, because normally he's a driver, right? Because he came with the Ostriker, but I actually put him on an 18 because he was a Ranger, because he's Desert Warfare qualified. So I kind of characterized him as, he's a Ranger. He's on an 18 first, and he's a wheelman second, in a way. So that's kind of, that's researching these file cards. Let me open up my brain to like, hey, where could these guys actually fit in the real world? What would they actually be doing? And so, kind of diving into the file card like you did, Desert Warfare trained, helped me help me figure that all out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, that is an important part. And then that last part is like the quote. So you're it's not just your version of it or your friend's version of it. It's another real character. It gives life to other characters that aren't even on this file card. Right. Because some of them would attribute it, right? If I'm remembering this correctly, some of them would attribute it to who's saying it correctly. Am I remembering that right?
My favorite one was, we're going to go back to Snow Job. He goes, you think it was rock and roll, I think it was a quote. He said, you think we gave him that name because he does his job on skis?
Right.
He's a con man or something.
Yeah. Shipwreck is your quintessential sailor. You can splice lime, fry powdered eggs in the tooth of a gale, and eat them, tell taller tales than a Senate Appropriations Committee, and take a 3-day liberty in Thule, Greenland, and come back smiling.
Totally green. Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones.
And so that's another G.I. Joe guy giving you his opinion of this G.I. Joe guy. It's awesome.
Yeah, more color to it. Yeah. There's the meat with the history and service record, and then the quote is like the color all over it. Yeah,
it's just dynamite. And then most of them, like we were saying, because it was the front of the card, you flip it and you see the piece of the front of the card and the piece that you ripped off to get the glue off. Then occasionally though, you get the complete square ones that you never had to cut out. Like I'm looking at Cutter, and because he came packaged with the box, it was a rectangular piece of pre-cut cardboard. So those are real. Like, I never cut those any further. Did you?
No, I just kept it as is. Right. Right.
Yeah, I never saw a need.
Well, actually, no. I'm thinking though, there probably once or twice I did have a vehicle, like maybe my Ace. I must have done it. Yeah.
Well, Ace. Let me look at. Oh no, my Ace. No, my Ace is square, or rectangle rather. Yeah. And so I have a rectangle Cutter. I have a Duke because I got Duke via mail order. My Ace as well. And as far as my collection goes, that's it. Those are the only ones that I got file cards left in that condition.
I may have probably more often than not actually trimmed those because I just wanted the OCD part of me.
Sure. Yeah.
Wanted to keep them that way.
And let's be real here. We weren't exact in our trimming. These are some of the most jagged cuts I've ever seen by a human.
Some the dotted lines are on there, some don't have the dotted lines on.
Right? Yeah. So what were you a guy who did you cut right above the dotted line, or did you try to go on the dotted line or below the dotted line?
Honestly, I don't remember. I was probably just in a rush just to get it out the package and into the deck.
I was a dotted line guy.
Yeah.
I kept them intact. And you know what though? It's funny. Oh no, because they were on the same card. I'm looking at one of the red backs. Yeah, no, I kept my dotted lines on there. I think my rationale, even as a kid, was I could always go back later and cut further, but if I cut too far and I'm unhappy with it, I could never go back and get something back that I cut off, you know?
Yeah. And actually, I'm glad you brought up that portion too, because I'm sure it's pretty obvious to folks that see the sample pages on the Kickstarter. But I did use the beige card background for these pages just as a nod and appreciation to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also or mixed into the design the old white with blue grid lines, vehicle blueprint paper in there too.
Oh, I love the
as part of the
blueprints.
design. Yeah,
That's a whole nother one.
Yeah.
Listeners, if you're out there and someone wants to talk blueprints, let's do that.
There you
That's
go.
its own
Yes.
show. I love the
definitely
blueprints. And I'm lucky enough to where when I had to end up years ago when I sold a lot of my vehicles, I didn't know where my blueprints were. Otherwise, I'm sure I would have included them in the eBay sale. Then I found my blueprints. So I still have all my blueprints. I just don't have the vehicles they went with.
Those are treasure.
That's a total treasure. Yeah, that's absolutely its own call. But we should mention that though, color wise. So at least in my era, which was, early like 82, 83 through about 88, there were really, of all the cards I'm looking at, there were really only two colors. There was like that brown beige you're talking about.
The beige, right?
And then there's the gray.
Then it went gray with the kind of the beachhead generation of cards, I think. Yeah, but there also were special colors when they had Tiger Force, Night Force, and Slaughter's Marauders. They had the different color ones. Yeah.
Oh,
so
see,
I remember Tiger
I
Force
literally never had any of those. So tell me about those.
Well, Tiger Force itself, they just took the palette of the file card. They turned it up real orange, and I think I don't have any Slaughter's Marauders, but that was maybe a lime green looking card.
Oh, okay.
And then Night Force, I think too, was a different kind of orange, if I recall. And I did have Lieutenant Falcon. I think I had the first original 6 Night Force, but I remember that was a different color then too from the original standard releases.
And eventually I know that they released some without any file cards on them, right? At some point, like maybe early 2000s or something like that. Or was it late 90s? Because I know that they became less of what we just finished describing, like less like a real dossier and more of like, this is the toy you're owning kind of a thing.
I can't remember where that defining line was. I know that like with the movie release, well, actually with the Retaliation releases of toys, we know that it just became a little a couple lines of verbiage on the back of the thing. Mm-hmm. It was very generic. Yeah, it didn't have military specialty or not. And then if you go to the Rise of Cobra releases around that era, they had the back of the file card be more of like an identification card, if I recall.
Yeah.
And it did have a little bit more a story behind that, but it didn't have it like articulated in bullet points, and it did call out like what weapon they used. And I can't remember if they actually call out the grade in there. And we skipped talking about the grade.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, we totally did. Yeah. I think because I never understood what it was, and to this day I still don't understand how the grades work. So is an E5 better than an E4, or how's that work?
Yeah, E5 would be better than E4. E4 is generally in Army it's corporal, and then E5 sergeant. E5 to all the way to E9 would be sergeant, either staff sergeant. I don't know off the top of my head really. There's staff sergeant and master sergeant, those type of delineations.
Let's go to the king. So General Hawk, he's just a straight brigadier general.
He's right. And depending on what time of what year that it was, it bounces from brigadier general to major general, I think.
Interesting. Leatherneck is listed as a gunnery sergeant. He doesn't get an E anything.
Oh, they didn't give him an E. So
no.
I think that's an E6, E7. I gotta go back.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Again, and that he's a Marine too, so they have different, slightly different classification. And then the Navy is all different.
Mutt is an SP4.
Yeah, specialist 4. And that was I think that's in conjunction the same level as the Corporal too, like an E4.
Cool.
I don't know exactly the differences in those, and I don't think they're used currently now. I have them in the book as E6, as
Mhm.
Staff Sergeant, because along the way of different iterations of character, they've slowly promoted along the line. I've noticed there would be a re-release of the OG 13. They all automatically got promotions, E4 to E5, that I
Well,
noticed.
listen, they should. Well, we
Yeah.
did
Oh,
when we talked about Ace, we went over his file cards and he got a
yeah.
demotion and then he got a promotion again.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
actually I just noticed that recently looking back. I was looking for something else running Ace, but I noticed that he started as a lieutenant or cap or lieutenant or captain. Then at one point, a couple file cards, couple iterations, he was a major. And then most recently, he's back to captain, which I well, I can explain that. It was just Hasbro brand
so,
writers just throwing
so
whatever
making a
together.
mistake, yeah. You know what I
Yeah.
was thinking of when I was talking about like how much they changed when I was surprised. I just randomly jumped to 94 and I grabbed Payload just because first one I grabbed.
Ooh, yeah.
And like that file card is like bright pink. It's a full body shot of him. The thing that I was thinking of is like they call out his weaponry. So it says like missile
Right.
launching quasar gun, oxygen regulator tubing, etc. It does still have a lot of those data points about him, and it does have some bio of him. But
Yeah, that's right. They had
the photo works like a this is your toy. You know, this
right.
is how we
It
want
was a
you to
little
play with it.
diagram. It was a figure of
Yes.
the diagram. They had little call outs. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah,
That was like the Ninja Force era, I think.
Yeah, that's
Or
what
they do
was
that.
tingling in the back of my head that changed. About
Yeah,
those.
yeah. No, I gotcha. Yeah.
Cool.
That for the most part, the content was kind of still there. They had the yeah.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you're doing. I mean, you said you're doing everybody, so you're going to do all the Battle Force 2000s and the payloads of the
Oh,
world.
they're called out there. They're called out too. Next
Are
volume.
you? Where is? Let me get their names right. Carcass and Predacon. Where are they going to fall? Because they weren't really part of Cobra.
Right. They'll probably get a nod in the third volume Cobra book. I'm not quite sure.
Lobato Max.
Yeah, you're gonna hit me with the Star Brigade aliens and the Mega Marine monsters or where they were.
Well,
I
listen,
still haven't figured out.
Since you're doing it like it's the verisimilitude and you're doing it real world,
Yeah.
why don't you just tie them in with some? I'm not saying Star Wars specifically, but some random sci-fi old school movie. That's how they came to Earth,
Right?
or make them
a
part of like Inhumanoids or ROM.
That's a good angle.
You know.
Yeah. Actually, that's a cool call out. Inhumanoids. Does Hasbro on them?
Yeah,
wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They we recently
There's never been a comic of that though, right? I mean, like recently, like we've had reintroductions of ROM and Micronauts.
ROM and Micronauts for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Inhumanoids, I don't think so. But recently we learned that what was it? Ace met his doom in both met his doom and like got a new rebirth in Inhumanoids.
What? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Go back, listen to the Ace episode. You'll learn a little something. You too, listeners.
Oh, okay, all right.
You learn the fate of Brad Armbruster. Also,
oh no kidding.
Yeah, it also someone told me that do you remember Cops, the Future Fighting Force?
That was the next thing that came to mind.
Yeah,
when you brought that up. Yep.
Beachhead's grandson or something.
Yep. Checkpoint was the name of the character. Yeah. But it does call out in tongue in cheek that he's related to someone in an elite 80s military force or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I meant to look it up earlier, but
that's great. So I mean, I think that opens the door. If you're doing verisimilitude, that opens the door for the Predacon and Lobato Max to be in that Hasbro space universe, whether it's Micronauts or ROM. You know, just throwing that out there. I'm full of ideas. That's all I'm saying.
You know, spoiler, I do have Matt Tracker in the second volume already now, so I guess might as well open the door.
You've opened the door. Mask is sitting right there. It's all sitting right there. It's all sitting right there. Well, listen, Greg Agustin, this has been an awesome conversation.
This has been fun. Thanks.
Going over these file cards in detail, just talking about everything about them that we love. Listeners, I hope you guys still have your file cards. I know you can collect them. You can still buy them on eBay. You find them at shows. I've started picking up ones that I don't even have the figures for, just because I want the file cards. They're an entirely different avenue of collection that you can do. with G.I. Joe and a different way to experience and enjoy your G.I. Joes. I think they're absolutely wonderful. And Greg, you're really doing great stuff with this Kickstarter. I'm looking forward to it.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So Kickstarter, should we just do a search? Is there a URL we can share?
You can hit us up with afteractionreport.net, and the link to the Kickstarter is there, or you could also just search After Action Report or Command Files at Kickstarter.
Yeah, it should show up real quick. And as of this listeners, when this episode drops, you do have right around a week or maybe a few days less. I'm not sure exactly when this is going to drop, but it's definitely going to be before the Kickstarter ends. So if you're hearing this, act fast. And if you happen to miss the first one, know that they're going to be doing part 2 and 3, so you can back those. And I'm sure the first one would be available as a reward and things like that. So
I do want to mention we did update the backers just recently, that for the cover art, we managed to secure Mark Pennington, the designer of the toys of way back, like Crazy Legs and Jinx and so forth. We got him to sign him to draw a wraparound cover for this part, which looks really cool right now.
That's fantastic. That's really cool. So that means it's going to look great. The interiors are going to look great. You have a couple sample pages on the Kickstarter right now. So please, listeners, go check that out. Greg Agustin, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, appreciate it. Had a blast.
Absolutely. And now we all know a lot more about G.I. Joe Filecards, and Joey's half the battle.